Daniel Cormier knocked out one of the baddest heavyweights on the planet with a single punch while being 5 inches shorter and giving up significant reach advantages. He became a 2-division UFC champion, beat legends on short notice, and did it all with a body everyone said was wrong for fighting. But here's the thing, DC's success wasn't an accident. His Olympic wrestling background, unique body mechanics, and unbreakable mindset created a fighting system that was nearly impossible to beat. Let me show you exactly how he did it. And hey, if you're ready to dive deep into fight breakdowns like this, smash that like button and subscribe so you never miss another video. Daniel Cormier was an NCAA Division I All-American wrestler at Oklahoma State University. He made the United States Olympic wrestling team twice. At the 2004 Olympics in Athens, he finished 4th place after losing to Russian wrestler Khajimurat Gatsalov in the semifinals. That's already an insane achievement. But in 2008, something heartbreaking happened. Cormier made the Olympic team again and was named team captain. He was ready to compete for gold. Then, while cutting weight, he suffered kidney failure and had to withdraw from competition. Imagine training your entire life for one moment and having it ripped away at the last second. Most people would quit. DC didn't. After the 2008 Olympics, Cormier walked into American Kickboxing Academy and started training MMA with Cain Velasquez, John Fitch, and Josh Koscheck. His Olympic-level wrestling became his superpower. That wrestling background gave him complete control over where fights happened. Ground, clinch, or standing, DC decided. His opponents had no say in the matter. Here's where it gets interesting. Daniel Cormier stands at 5 feet 11 inches tall. His reach is 72.5 inches. In light heavyweight and heavyweight divisions, that's tiny. Guys like John Jones have an 84-inch reach. So how did DC knock out bigger, longer fighters? His body was built differently. Cormier has an incredibly thick, powerful torso with strong hips and explosive legs. That compact frame gave him devastating leverage in the clinch and ridiculous takedown power. His low center of gravity made him almost impossible to take down. John Jones became the first person ever to take Cormier down in MMA during their fight at UFC 182, and that alone was shocking. But here's the killer advantage. DC generated knockout power from impossible angles. He didn't need space to wind up. He could be pressed against the cage in a clinch and suddenly crack you with a short hook that would end your night. That's exactly what happened to Stipe Miocic at UFC 227. Cormier caught Miocic exiting the clinch with a clean hook to the chin, and Miocic went down instantly. With that one punch, DC became only the second fighter in UFC history to hold 2 championship belts at the same time. Before the UFC, DC dominated Strikeforce. After his professional MMA debut in September 2009, Cormier went undefeated in his first 11 fights. He became the King of the Cage heavyweight champion and the ex-MMA heavyweight champion in 2010. But the Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix in 2012 changed everything. Cormier entered as an alternate, which means he wasn't even supposed to be in the tournament. Then he knocked out Antonio Bigfoot Silva in the first round. Bigfoot was massive, but Cormier caught him with multiple shots to the jaw that made him collapse. DC finished with 2 hammer blows to the face. Oh, and Cormier did this with a broken hand. In the finals on May 19, 2012, he faced Josh Barnett, a legendary grappler and fighter. Cormier dominated, winning by unanimous decision with scores of 49-46, 50-45, and 50-45 to become the Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix champion. This was only his 10th professional MMA fight. Let that sink in. 10 fights, and he was already beating Hall of Famers. You can't talk about DC without John Jones. Their rivalry is one of the most intense in combat sports history. It started in 2010 when Jones told Cormier backstage at UFC 121, "I bet you that I could take you down." For an Olympic wrestler, that's basically a declaration of war. In 2014, DC dropped to light heavyweight, beat Patrick Cummins and Dan Henderson, and earned his shot at Jones. Their first fight at UFC 182 on January 3, 2015 was brutal. Jones won by unanimous decision, 49-46 on all 3 scorecards. Jones took DC down 3 times, the first takedowns anyone had ever scored on Cormier in MMA. After winning, Jones grabbed the mic and said, "I don't respect Daniel Cormier. I hope he's somewhere crying right now." That hurt DC deeply. But here's where DC's mental strength shows. When Jones got stripped of his title, Cormier fought Anthony "Rumble" Johnson for the vacant belt at UFC 187 on May 23, 2015. In the opening seconds, Johnson dropped DC with a massive overhand right. Johnson was one of the hardest punchers in UFC history. Most fighters would panic or get finished. DC didn't. He recovered, used his superior conditioning in wrestling, and submitted Johnson with a rear naked choke in the third round to become the UFC light heavyweight champion. After winning, DC looked at the camera and said,
"John Jones, get your together, I'm waiting for you."
DC defended his title multiple times, including against Alexander Gustafsson at UFC 192. He also fought Rumble Johnson again at UFC 210 on April 8, 2017. Cormier secured another rear naked choke in the second round after landing hard punches. Johnson retired immediately after the fight. The Jones rematch finally happened at UFC 214 on July 29, 2017. Jones knocked DC out with a head kick in the third round. It looked like their rivalry was over. Then Jones tested positive for a banned substance, and the result was overturned to a no contest. DC never officially lost that fight. Here's a crazy story that shows DC's adaptability. At UFC 200 on July 9, 2016, Jon Jones got removed from the card due to a potential anti-doping violation. Anderson Silva, one of the greatest fighters of all time, stepped in on just 2 days' notice to face Cormier. Silva was a middleweight legend moving up in weight. Cormier took him down in all 3 rounds and dominated with ground and pound, winning by unanimous decision with all 3 judges scoring at 30-26. Silva landed some good shots, including a stiff body kick in the third round that had DC wincing, but Cormier grabbed the clinch and controlled him until the final bell. That's championship-level preparation and fight IQ. If you're enjoying this breakdown, hit that like button right now and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on for more fight analysis. After the Jones drama, DC moved to heavyweight. On July 7, 2018, at UFC 227, he faced Stipe Miocic for the heavyweight championship. Miocic was the defending champion and one of the greatest heavyweight fighters ever. DC knocked him out in the first round with a perfectly timed hook. On November 3, 2018, DC defended against Derek Lewis at UFC 230. He submitted Lewis with a rear naked choke in the second round, becoming the first man ever to submit Lewis in MMA. With that win, DC became the first UFC fighter to win and defend both the light heavyweight and heavyweight belts. Miocic wanted his belt back. They rematched at UFC 241 on August 17, 2019. Miocic adjusted his game plan, attacking DC's body with punches. He finished Cormier in the fourth round with a TKO. The trilogy fight at UFC 252 on August 15, 2020 was an absolute war. Miocic won by unanimous decision with scores of 49-46, 49-46, and 48-47. Cormier couldn't see out of his left eye during the later rounds, but kept fighting anyway. After the fight, DC retired with a record of 22 wins, 3 losses, and 1 no contest. Let's talk about what really separated DC from everyone else. This man got his Olympic dreams destroyed in 2008. He got dropped by one of the hardest punchers in the sport and still won the title. He lost to Jon Jones in fights that broke his heart. He lost his heavyweight title, but every single time DC came back stronger. When Johnson dropped him in their first fight, DC didn't panic. He stuck to his game plan, used his superior cardio, and wore Johnson down until he got the submission. DC's fight IQ was off the charts. He studied opponents, created smart game plans, and adjusted mid-fight when things weren't working. He was a team captain in wrestling, became a coach, and is now one of the most respected MMA commentators. He balanced killer instinct with emotional control. Even in retirement, he's helping the next generation and breaking down fights for fans. Here's the system that made DC nearly unstoppable. He uses a unique stance with both hands outstretched instead of a typical boxing guard. He smothers opponents' hands and feeds in strikes once they're out of the way, then moves into a clinch. His wrestling threat forced opponents to worry constantly about takedowns. That made them lower their stance and overcommit to defense, which opened up his punches. Cormier would bend at the waist, take his head to his right side, and control his opponent's lead leg. Once he had the leg, he'd chain a run-the-pipe takedown into a high crotch takedown. He loved grabbing a wrestling clinch with his left hand and exchanging in dirty boxing, a technique made famous by Randy Couture. Against the cage, he'd trap opponents and attack the body with knees and punches. To enter the clinch from striking range, DC uses a straight arm to block an opponent's right cross or overhand, then slides the same hand into a clinch to throw uppercuts and short right hooks. He uses the mummy guard, extending his hands forward with open palms to occupy the space where punches travel. He traps and grabs opponents' hands before countering. If he catches opponents with their hands down as he exits the clinch, a short hook means lights out. That's the Miocic knockout at UFC 226. On the ground, DC used crushing top pressure to tire opponents out and land damaging shots. He controlled wrists and hips so they couldn't escape. Every part of this system fed into the next. If you defended the wrestling, he'd punch you. If you defended the punches, he'd take you down. If you tried to create space, he'd push you to the cage and restart the cycle. Even though he was shorter with less reach than most opponents, his fundamentals, conditioning, and pressure made him nearly unstoppable. Daniel Cormier was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame in 2022. He proved you don't need the perfect body or the longest reach to become a champion. You need elite skills, an unbreakable mind, and the willingness to adapt. DC became the first man to submit Derek Lewis, beat Anderson Silva on short notice, survived getting dropped by Rumble Johnson to submit him twice, and knocked out Stipe Miocic to become a two-division champion. He faced the best fighters on the planet and beat almost all of them. That's the anatomy and psychology of a true champion. That's Daniel Cormier. If this video helped you understand what made DC so special, do me a favor and drop a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments what fighter you want me to break down next. I'll see you in the next one.